What is the difference between the INFJ and the INFP personality type? Now, one of the biggest mix-ups in personality typing is between INFJs and INFPs, and if you watch this video to the end, you're going to find out exactly which one you are. So I am going to be discussing a lot of technical things like the functions, but what I really want you to think about is the actual behaviors and the way that each of these types think in the real world. Now, both of these types, they're idealists, they're both caring and creative, but there are some pretty big differences. For one thing, all of the functions that these two types have, they're all completely opposite of each other. So here are the INFP functions. It's introverted feeling, FI, extroverted intuition, NE, introverted sensing, SI, and extroverted thinking, TE. And for the INFJ, we have introverted intuition, NI, extroverted feeling, FE, introverted thinking, TI, and extroverted sensing, SE. So the functions, they're all literally backwards for these two types. And these two types, they appear like they're similar from the outside, but they're different in their inner workings. So what's going on the inside is not the same as what's going on the outside, what other people can see. INFPs, they use their FI, that's their introverted feeling. They use that heavily, and that's all about their values. It's about their ethics. It's about their feelings. So they understand how they feel inside. They are super authentic in that way. And INFJs, we're also authentic, but we will chameleon ourselves. And all of us INFJs know we will change ourselves a little bit around people to make them comfortable because we're all about harmony. Now, INFPs, on the other hand, they are so authentic that they can be rigid. They're not going to meet anybody halfway. They are very sure of the way they feel. And again, this is because of their FI. Remember, INFJs, they have FE. Well, INFPs, they have FI, introverted feeling. They know exactly how they feel. So a question you might hear an INFP asking their self inside, if you could hear their thinking, their mind would say, is this moral? Does this feel right to me? Does this align with my values? Things like that. If an issue aligns with their inner values and feelings, then they are going to accept that idea. And if it doesn't, then they're going to just toss it away. They're going to reject it. Now, an INFP will usually tell you more freely anyway how they feel about something, even if they disagree with you, than an INFJ will. That's especially true if they're comfortable with you. INFJs, though, on the other hand, we're concerned about social harmony. We're worried about the feelings of others. We're thinking, is it appropriate for me to say this right now? How is this going to make this other person feel? So that's the difference between using FE, extroverted feeling, concerned with those people out there, and FI, which the INFP has, which is concerned about how I feel. Am I being authentic to myself? I can give you a little story about this. I went to Austin, Texas to a startup convention, and it was a lot of going around talking in small groups. And I remember that I was in a small group, and there was a guy standing off to the side. And this guy looked really uncomfortable, and I could feel him over there looking at us, thinking he felt really awkward, and I wanted him to get in that group. That's an INFJ. I was feeling this guy's discomfort, and so I looked over at him and I said, hey, what's your name? And he said his name, and I said, come over here, come in here. And I introduced all of them to him because it was really making me uncomfortable that he wasn't part of the group. That is an INFJ thing right there. So an INFJ is also going to try and be a diplomat. They're going to try to bring somebody along to their point of view, whereas the INFP will just kind of put it out there and let the chips fall where they may. INFJs, a lot of times, they're going to try and avoid conflict. They're going to try and get along with another person, and we can kind of lose ourselves in a conversation when we do that. We're almost going too far over to the other side. So that happens with INFJs a lot, not so much with INFPs. INFPs really know their values. They really know how they feel about things. And when they're confused, they just look at the map that's inside of them. Their internal feelings, their internal values are more important to them than what others around them think. Now, us INFJs, we're often confused about our values. We're not really sure how we feel about things. And so looking inside to see how we feel about something, that leads nowhere a lot of the time. In our minds, we're saying, how do I feel about this? I don't know, really. Well, the INFP says, what's there to analyze? I know how I feel about it. This is how I feel about it. So INFJs and feeling other people's emotions. On this channel, many times we've discussed how INFJs know how they feel almost more by how the people around them are feeling and not by how they're feeling themselves. When someone's upset, we can tell without even asking them if they're upset. We just know. We can feel that emotion. The INFP really can't do that. What they do is see how people around them feel, and then they remember how they felt that way in the past. So the INFJ is actually feeling the other person's emotions, almost absorbing them, and the INFP is seeing the other person's emotion and then remembering when they themselves felt that way. And it's a different process. It looks similar from the outside, but it's also kind of the opposite. If this video is helping you, consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the INFJ Circle. So some questions to ask yourself to determine if you're an INFJ or an INFP are, do you have trouble knowing who you are? INFJs, they often do. Do you have issues with knowing your worth? Does it take you a while to decide on your values? These are INFJ traits. INFJs would say yes to those questions. INFPs would probably say no to those questions. But every great power, it comes with downsides. Even Superman had kryptonite. But don't worry about these things because they can be worked on. Every personality type has things that they can work on. And again, I'm not saying that INFPs can't care about the opinions of others because they can, but they have more of a tendency to go on their own feelings. Now, another important thing to remember is INFPs also have trouble making decisions. So INFJs and INFPs often have trouble making decisions. INFPs see so many possibilities even in everyday tasks, that they can kind of freeze up. And remember, all of this personality stuff, it's about the way we think. It's about the way we feel, and it's about the way we make decisions. It's not the be-all, end-all of everything. The MBTI, it's a tool we use to know ourselves better and to get a bearing on our personality territory, so to speak. So MBTI is a map, and a map is not the territory. Things change a bit when you get out in the wild, when you get out in the wilderness, when you get into the actual territory, things change. But MBTI is a great map. Now let's talk about NI. That's introverted intuition, and this is the INFJ's dominant function. And NI is a bit slow, but it is also very thorough and very complete. And that's why INFJs, sometimes they can't think of what to say on the spot sometimes, and it may be why you space out and think. Go silent for a while, you're thinking, that's an INFJ trait. You also may stare off during conversations and try to think of what to say. And you may also prefer writing things down before you say them. So when I make these videos, I write out the script. You know, I'm a writer first and a speaker second. So that's an INFJ trait, that you want to write things down, you want to get things clear before you go out and do it. Not really all that spontaneous. You're more planned. So this is also why you may learn slower than your peers, but then later, after you learn for a little while, your learning takes off exponentially, and you actually end up knowing more about the topic than your friend does. You just have to continue it a little bit longer. They catch on quicker, but you know things more fully. Now, one thing to remember is with dominant NI, once you make a decision, you are going to be very stubborn about that decision. So Tony Robbins was like this about the INFJ. They're like a bloodhound. After they've made a decision, they are locked in on that goal. So they're going to seek down those goals and they're going to let nothing stand in their way. Well, INFPs, they have NE. That's extroverted intuition, exactly the opposite of the INFJ. And that makes them great at seeing a lot of ideas, but not so great at narrowing down their focus to one idea. So the INFJ can eventually narrow down their ideas to one goal, whereas the INFP has more trouble, and they can have like shiny object syndrome, where it's like, oh, I'm going to try this, and then a month later, they're like, oh, look at that, and they try this. So the INFJ is more focused on one particular goal, or can be, whereas the INFP sees lots of goals, and they can't decide which one to stick with. INFPs are basically idea machines. Now, this isn't to say that an INFP can't accomplish a goal. Remember, the map is not the territory. So this personality stuff is just our map. But they are going to have more trouble getting focused on one thing than the INFJ does. And if we think about INFJ research, we can see that playing out, because what happens when an INFJ researches? They will get obsessed with one topic. Like I've got several in my mind right now, but I'll tell you one is Custer's Last Stand. I got obsessed with Custer's Last Stand and whether it was Custer's fault completely, and Reno and Benteen and what exactly happened. We find out everything about a topic when we get obsessed with it, so we focus in on one thing. And INFPs are a lot more likely to switch topics before fully exploring each one. So they may like Custer's Last Stand for 2 weeks, and then they just switch over before they know everything about it. They just get a brief overview of it, and they're like, that's enough. Now I see this other thing. I like this other thing. And so they're moving into that one. So because of this, they can have trouble reaching mastery in one thing. So they may be a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Now, INFJs, they like things being planned out. That doesn't mean that they like the planning part, that they like the organization of it, but they do find it necessary to have some kind of plan, some kind of idea of what's going to go on. So think about a vacation as an INFJ. You're going to think about it. You're going to think, okay, so we're going here, we can go there, we can go there. It makes an INFJ feel safe to know that everything's in order before they go. INFPs, on the other hand, they don't really like planning. And again, it's all about the way we think. It's not about being put in a box or whatever. It's knowing how we think as human beings. One thing about MBTI that I want to talk about is MBTI is not some kind of woo-woo stuff. A lot of times people will, even in the comments on this channel, they'll get on here and they'll be like, oh, this stuff is not scientific. This is crazy. This is like woo-woo. And really, it's as scientific as observational psychology can be. So we observe how people think, and then we label it. And in the same way, you might say, this dish is rounded, and it will hold liquid. Let's call it a bowl. And you might say, this dish is flat and will be easy to eat off of. Let's call it a plate. So you get the facts through observation of how the dish works. And in the same way, you get the facts of MBTI through how the person's mind works, how they interact with the world. So it's the same thing. It's not woo-woo. It's actually proven stuff of how this person is actually thinking, how their brain works. And people's brains, they work differently. And you can put that in context. It's why big corporations use MBTI. It's why big businesses use MBTI. It's why the CIA, the FBI use it. They use this typing because it works to find out a baseline of how someone thinks. And that's why we like it, because we can see that this is working. We can see that, oh, this is how my brain works. And when you know more about something, you can more effectively use it. So it helps us to be more productive and successful people to understand how our mind works and how we can better interact with society because of that. So it's an invaluable map, really. Now, INFJs, they also question authority a lot. So they'll ask why other people just go along with the herd. Why are you just going along with the herd without asking any questions? Because we're all the time asking questions and questioning things. You might call an INFJ counterculture. So this is because of TI. It's introverted thinking, our third function, and it gives us a real logic and a childlike questioning ability. And if we work on it, we can develop it. Now, personally, I did a lot of sentential logic, also known as sentential calculus. I did a degree in philosophy. So that's a great way to develop your TI. But the INFP has TE, and that's extroverted thinking, and it's in their fourth spot. And extroverted thinking is gathering facts and data from the real world, the external world. And to be honest, the fourth function, we're going to talk about the INFJ's fourth function in a minute, but the fourth function in any personality type is really not a strength. In fact, it is a weakness. The INFJ's fourth function is SE, extroverted sensing, for example, and that's our weak point. So the INFP is not super strong in their extroverted thinking, gathering facts, gathering data from the external world. INFPs are dominated by their introverted feeling, their FI, so I think that's why they have trouble with this extroverted thinking, is because they already feel they know what's right. So they're not going to look to experts or what experts are saying on a topic or data. They're going to say, well, I feel it's this way, so that must be the way it is. And again, this personality stuff, it's all about strengths and weaknesses. No personality type is perfect, but it's good to know your strengths and weaknesses so you can work on that stuff. So you remember when I said that INFPs relate to others by observing a person and seeing how they feel, and then remembering a time when they felt that way. INFPs like to re-experience emotions from the past. So they might be into pictures, they may like movies, scrapbooks, music from different periods in their life that may take them back in time, give them a certain feeling. And INFJs, we're usually more future-oriented. And it's not to say that INFJs can't reminisce. I've been known to do that, but it's not an everyday occurrence that I start looking backwards and thinking. I have a more future-oriented mindset, and that future-oriented mindset can cause me anxiety. You know, they say the past gives you depression if you think about that too much, and the future gives you anxiety. So INFJs generally future-oriented, and INFPs comfortable with the past, past-oriented. Now remember, we have all of the personality traits. Every person on earth does, but it's about your tendencies most of the time. Now, like an INFJ, INFPs like to spend time at home. This is something that's similar, another one of the reasons that these two types get mixed up. And finally, INFJs have SE in their fourth spot, and that's extroverted sensing, and that means sensing what's going on in the world around you. This is our big weakness. Maybe you run into things, maybe you run into door frames, maybe you run into counters, stub your toe, things like that. And this is largely because this function is your fourth function, and that is a big weakness. Your fourth function, always in a personality type, that is a weakness for that personality type. So you may be off in your mind thinking about something, and then, boom, you run into a physical object in the world that brings you back into SE, that brings you back into sensing the world around you, but there for a minute, you were off somewhere else. Now, another thing you might forget to do is you might forget to drink water while you're working. You might forget to eat. You might not realize the needs of your body for a long period of time. That's very common for an INFJ. It can get us into trouble sometimes because we don't give ourselves enough self-care and we don't give ourselves enough attention. So be aware of this as an INFJ tendency. It is another clue that you're an INFJ. So let's go over a basic overview now. INFPs will give people their true opinions a lot more freely than an INFJ, and the INFJ will often chameleon themselves a bit in social situations to make everybody comfortable. They'll change their personality just a little bit. They are chameleons. INFJs value social harmony. That's one of the reasons they're chameleoning themselves. They don't want to disappoint anyone. They don't like to disappoint others. INFJs also understand other people's emotions. That's their FE at work. They understand other emotions more immediately than they understand their own emotions. And they're often unsure about how they feel until later. So they may think back and they think, boy, did I say the right thing here? Boy, I hope that didn't disappoint them. INFPs are very aware of how they feel, and they want to be true to themselves. They want to be true to their values. They may want to hide away the intensity of their emotions sometimes. INFPs, they have more ideas than INFJs, but are less likely to focus in and accomplish one goal. Another thing INFJs do is they absorb the feelings of others. They really need to be alone more than an INFP because the only time they can really rest is when they're away from pretty much all people, because they absorb the feelings, the emotions of these other people. INFPs, they observe the feelings of others, and then they compare that to the things they felt in the past, and that is the way they feel empathy. Another big one, INFJs are always thinking about the group as a whole, and they can adjust their behavior to fit different personalities. INFJs plan more than INFPs. INFPs really, they don't like plans that much, to be honest. INFJs want to know what's going on, at least in general, so that they can feel safer. INFJs are mom friends. So look back in your life. Have you been the friend in a group of friends that takes care of the group, that is worried about this person or worried about that person or worried about your parent on a ladder, worried about one of your friends who's doing something irresponsible? Are you the one that is worried about that? And are you the mom friend, the friend in a group of friends that takes care of the group? That's very INFJ. So INFJs are primarily focused on objective data, and that means they are analyzing, they are drawing conclusions based on patterns they see in the world around them. INFJs are huge on pattern recognition. That's a big INFJ trait. Predicting the future, finding out what's going to happen based on what happened with a pattern in the past. INFPs, they're primarily focused on subjective data, their own opinion, which is to say that they analyze, they draw conclusions based on their personal values, their opinions, how they feel about things. That takes precedence over looking outside at patterns. It takes precedence over authorities on a topic. The INFP will say, well, I don't care what that says. This is how I feel about it. This is my thought. This is my feeling, and I'm sticking with that. So it's hard to tell sometimes if someone's an INFJ or an INFP from the outside. But as we can see from this video, when we look inside the mind, we start to see how much more they differ and how to tell the difference between the two. But if you want more information, you want to know more ways to spot an INFJ, watch this video next.